Welcome to a live edition of Over with the Overturfs with Isla Vista Student Ministry, UMC. Thanks for hosting us. This has been a real honor to be a part of this. So thanks for having us.
It's been a work in progress. Over the years, many people have told us it'd be a good idea to do a podcast. And I was like, does this involve being on video? And then when I found out I could just be alone in our bedroom and not be seen by the world, then I signed on. But we've really enjoyed doing it. We've done 7 episodes. We've had people contact us, people we do not know, people that we know from Iona, people from our family. But the purpose of it was we just wanted to create a safe place, especially in this day and age, for people to share and for people to vent without being attacked, about whatever it is. It could be anything from they didn't get the drink they wanted through the drive-through to discussing politics over dinner with their family and how terrible that went. And also we have 2 very different perspectives. So we thought it'd be really neat to start a podcast and answer questions and interact with people from 2 different perspectives. Mm-hmm. And then finally, just a forum to invite people, people that don't think like us, people that don't believe like us, people that maybe didn't vote like us, and a chance to talk to them and hear them. Because right now in our world, we don't see a lot of people being able to just have conversations without it turning violent or angry. So we started that, and then we couldn't believe it. We started getting emails with questions. So we've just been going with it. Mm-hmm. Some of our episodes are light and fun. And then we had an episode that was pretty heavy after the attack on the Capitol. And we did get feedback about, wow, that was really heavy to hear from you guys, but we're glad you did it. But we really like the light stuff. And then we did some light stuff for Valentine's Day, and we got emails that said, wow, we'd really like you to talk more about the heavy stuff. So we've been enjoying it. So we're excited because we have a couple questions today that we got to look at together, and we would love to talk about.
And I think the process, surprisingly for both of us, it's been a little cathartic. It's been nice for us to just sit down and have a conversation about things and allow other people into our quote unquote living room and just enjoy that conversation with us.
And to help people, the piece we did about our story and struggle with infertility, which also shared a little bit about me leaving ministry. We got quite a few emails from people that are struggling with suicidal ideation, PTSD, depression, anxiety. So that's been wonderful to reach out and to kind of use my background as a therapist to help people, because I do truly miss that.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
I love our questions.
Yeah, no, they're deep.
Our questions are all over the place, though. This week we're going to go everywhere. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited. But you're the assigned reader for the first question.
Right, because we've all found out that I'm an amazing reader.
I know. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So the first question is as follows. Recently, a large number of Americans have become obsessed with crazy QAnon beliefs, which in many cases isolates them from family and society. What does that tell us about human faith/beliefs? How can we know what we believe doesn't sound just as crazy, in quotes, to someone else? And how can people caught in such a cultish beliefs be rescued? This one is, this one is tough. We were talking about this question a little bit earlier, and two things kind of popped into my head. The first being just recently, within the last couple of weeks, I had a passenger. For those of you who don't know, I'm a rideshare driver right now. And I had a passenger come into my car. We were giving the ride, and she immediately asked me, "Do you love the Lord?" Which, you're kind of in my place of business at this point. Initially I wanted to say no. I don't really believe in that right now, but I didn't want to invite that kind of aggressive conversation. So I just said, yes, I do. Right.
Because you have, it's not
right.
Yeah.
So, it's that kind of just aggressive stance though, that does kind of come off as crazy sometimes. And I have in my former place of employment, I to this day, if I see these customers, I will walk away because they were super aggressive. They'd had a conversation with me about leaving the faith, and they immediately took that as I was their mission at that point. Every time they saw me, they were trying to bring me back to the fold, if you will. And it got pretty, like, it was a little traumatizing. Like, I literally would walk away and just tell other employees, like, I'm sorry, I gotta remove myself. You guys deal with this one. So I think, from a outside perspective of somebody that used to be inside, it can come across as a little aggressive and crazy sometimes, right?
So, yeah, when I read this question, I immediately thought about, I have flown during the pandemic because my family is in Florida, and my sister really needed me. And so I did get on a plane. And unfortunately, I chose the one airline that was not holding the middle seats open. And so I was on a plane during a pandemic with a woman practically sitting in my lap. And she was reading a book, and I made mention of the book. And she said, "Oh, I'm reading this book because my family said I can't bring my book on the plane that I really wanted to read." And I said, "Well, what is that?" And she said, "It's a book on how to join the QAnon belief system." And I was a little taken back because at this point I'd only heard a little bit about the QAnon belief system. I hadn't, hadn't dove into it to study it. And she said, "My family was scared that if I brought the book on the plane, I would be attacked or taken off the plane by security." So that piqued my curiosity even more. What is this about? I have to find out more about this. And as I was reading it, I completely understand, and I think it would be good for us as believers and as Christians to be careful during these times, because I remember when I was in seminary and we talked about the blood and the body of Christ. I remember in the Lutheran church and having family in the Catholic church, and in hearing that we're going to drink of the blood and we're going to partake of the body of Christ. And I remember thinking, this sounds a little scary. So now we fast forward to this day and age where an aspect of the QAnon belief, they are discussing things like cannibalism and things like this that do scare us, that make us think, what is this about? I think as Christians, we do need to be careful what we're focusing on sharing with the world. And this goes back to when we spoke to the church last year. This is where theology fails us. I read this question and I think to myself, how can we know if what we believe doesn't sound just as crazy? Well, there's a good way to not sound crazy, which is to just be authentically who you are, a Christ-like person, and don't live by and preach the archaic theologies and the things that make people nervous. It isn't always the best approach for someone to get into a vehicle to a complete stranger and ask, "Do you know the Lord?" or "Are you saved?" or "Do you know Jesus?" Because it does put people off and it does make people uncomfortable. So I understand how we fast forward to today, that this woman was terrified to read that book on the plane. Now, by no means am I comparing the QAnon belief system to Christianity, because it's polar opposite in many ways. But the question is brilliant, that it says, how do we make sure we don't sound just as crazy? And I think the long and short of it is that if we are living authentic lives, true lives, and we're focusing more on the gospel, it's very simple, the gospel, the life of Christ, that keeps us from, quote, sounding crazy. Because there's really not a lot you could go wrong if you're being kind, if you're giving to your community, if you're showing up. Where we go wrong is when we start scaring people. If you don't do this, this will happen. If you don't go to church, this will happen. If you don't believe this, you could go to hell. If you're gay, you could go to hell. If you're Jewish, you could go. These kinds of things, I think, are what have labeled Christians as crazy. And if you look at the statistics, I don't know if you guys know, but sadly, Christianity is losing, especially more conservative denominations. They're losing believers. I mean, they're down in terms of numbers. And I think it has a lot to do with people just getting to the point where they're fearful of the death, doom, and destruction of it. So then QAnon comes on the scene, and this woman, she went on to say to me on the plane, which really broke my heart, "I'm just looking for something to believe in. I just need hope." And she's using terms that in the past people would have connected to Christianity, not to QAnon or to Satanism or any type of other outlandish belief system. She was expressing needs that the Christian faith could fulfill. if we weren't so busy focusing on the law or the Old Testament or the consequences of when we fail, when we mess up, when we're not good enough. So I do think Christians need to be careful. We're in a really dicey time right now. And if you want to share the faith and not appear to be as crazy as this belief system is, we need to live a lot more like Christ and a lot less like the Old Testament.
Right.
So that's what we thought when we read that question. Any thoughts from you guys?
I would add, oh, sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
No, you're okay. I was gonna say, I agree. I know, like, a few weeks ago, back in December, I spoke and I said that growing up in a household with a father who was raised Catholic, a mother who was raised Jewish, and then I was raised in a Methodist church, I've kind of gotten like a full whirlwind of all different religions. So like, I was speaking about how I don't really think that I strictly identify with one religion. And that it's made me like a lot more well-rounded, and I'm able to have different conversations with people about their different belief systems. So I definitely think that I agree of, you know, we have to be in the times of thinking more presently and not so strict on like the Old Testament in the past, because there are so many different religions that are growing and changing with our times. And so I think it's important to keep your eyes open.
The other thing that struck me about this passenger on the plane was she had been raised Christian, and now she's searching for something outside of Christianity. And the therapist in me gently inquired about what drew you to the QAnon belief. And she said it was her politics, but she said more so it was that she wasn't feeling fulfilled in her belief system. And that made me really sad, because to go from not feeling fulfilled in Christianity to QAnon is a huge jump. Now, you know, we've gotten a similar response when we say that we're more agnostic. People have looked at us like we just said that we bit the heads off of bats, or we're doing, you know, animal sacrifices. Those are the looks we get. Like, we recently had a friend who said, well, you're not in ministry anymore, so do you worship the devil? And I'm like, how did we go from not being in organized religion to worshiping the devil? Like, that's way too much TV. I mean, they're watching way too much TV, because that's not how that process goes.
I've had similar experiences with telling people I don't necessarily strictly identify with a specific religion, and then they just assume that I don't believe in anything and that I'm like an atheist. Right. And I'm like how, where did those two like come together? So,
but that's also the fear speaking, you know, when you come from a place of fear like that, it's going to bring out responses like that.
Yeah, that's the other element to the QAnon belief system too, is there's a lot of fear, or they teach a lot of fear to get submission. And where that's going to resonate with people is, you know, we've already had people tell us that they're comparing that to Catholicism. So it's kind of scary that something like this belief system shouldn't even be in the same room with other religions. So I think as Christians, we need to be really careful how we are portraying ourselves and our belief right now when we have this floating around and people are actually clinging to it, saying they need something new.
Right.
So I think we should be careful.
And if you let your actions speak for yourself, people will then come to you like, why, like, what's your secret sauce?
Yeah,
like,
why are you so happy?
Right, exactly. So let your actions speak louder than your words, and then when people ask you, that's when you can share your story.
Yeah, when I meet new people and I'm like, what is your secret? What are you drawn to? You know, a lot of times people will say, well, it's my belief system. But sadly, I think we've moved away from that a little bit. And I think as Christians, we do need to advertise the joy, the happiness, the solace, the peace, more so than the consequences of being a sinner. Because that's not what's attracting people, and people don't want to hear that. They already feel bad about themselves. And I think the QAnon, you know, this belief coming on, it becoming such a big deal now politically, is really dangerous, and it's going to draw good people into it that really are just searching for hope within probably Protestant faith.
Yeah, you know, I want to chime in here. I just read a very interesting article just yesterday about young mother with a child who came out of this system, this belief system. And she said what the difference that she's noticing now that she's come out of it is that, you know, she realizes she was caught in the system of fear and negativity, and how horrific it is for her now to, be able to leave that behind and have real hope again and positivity in her life. So I think we're at a threshold now as Christians, especially as progressive Christians, can be of much help, to these people, because actually, from what I've read, is that QAnon is really also in bed with very fundamentalist and conservative Christianity.
Yes,
because they too have over the years, pushed the principle of fear and fear mongering and negative conspiracy theories and all of that. So it's sort of like a natural, what's the word? So it sort of like goes together really well. We as progressive Christians can step in here and talk about the real love, the unconditional love of God, and the hope we have, for a better world, and how we can be part of it, and all of that. I think those are exactly the kind of things that people are really craving, and those people have just been misled, and we could maybe make a difference. I don't know how, I don't know how to do that, but we have something to offer.
Right.
Yeah, because if you think about what she said to me, she said, well, I'm just looking for hope. And I had to really hide my facial expression, because I thought to myself, she's leaving Christianity and going to the QAnon belief system in search of hope. How did she not find hope there? But I kind of, it resonates with me, because if you think about Ben and my story of being raised where religion was used as an abuse tactic, I get why she didn't maybe find hope there. Mm-hmm. Because I remember just living in constant fear. We were always scared of disappointing God, the second coming, going to hell. I mean, I think about, we just have a really tall order right now to stop focusing on that part of the law and focus, as you said, the authentic life of Christ. I think that would really help. I really believe that's the answer too, is just showing up. We've talked about that on an episode where just show up, just right. Be there for people and love them where they're at. And that's the core difference, I think, where Christians do have a lot more to offer.
Right. Yeah. Show empathy.
And empathy, compassion, right. Patience.
With your background as counselors, do you have any thoughts, like I do, that this current situation is a failure of American education? Because it's just astounding to me how many people are just totally ignorant about psychology and sociology effects. And there's plenty of books out there about the true believer kind of thing, whether it's Christian fundamentalism or the QAnon. Like you said, there's very much similarity between them. So she's just trading one brand off for another that's maybe a little bit newer, but just as bad. And so to me, I'm with you on your theology so far, because I look at theology of coming from the sciences, and I came from a non-church going family, but in high school already, I was saying, I was advertising myself as an atheist. Until I got on to Friedrich Nietzsche. I do speak German, and I'm kind of in sync with the German culture there. And so then Paul Tillich was visited the university that I attended, and so while I was taking a physics math program, I was also taking honors classes in these social sciences. And so when I read Tillich and says God is the ground of being, I said, well, I can agree with that. And to me, to a physicist, God is the field equation for whatever energy system you're talking about. But it's not a personal human being, anthropomorphic entity. And so to me, anybody in the sciences, I don't see in this day and age could ever believe in that kind of a God anyway.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. The educational part is interesting, because I also think there's a cult-like factor here. And if you've ever read or watched any of the documentary, whether it's about David Koresh or any cult membership, they were all longing to belong. Right. They didn't have family. They didn't have people that took care of them. And when I look at these people, they're drawn and attracted to the concept of being part of something bigger than themselves, which should be religion. I mean, people should be wanting to look to their faith to be part of something. But sadly, I think we've just lost sight of bringing people in, no matter who they are, what they believe, where they're from, again, how they voted, what color their skin is, who they're married to. The problem with these belief systems is they portray themselves as all welcoming when it should be the church that's all welcoming. So these belief systems attract people that feel let down, put out, unacceptable. So I think that's a big part of the QAnon, because they've also attracted the political side of things, where they feel like they're the martyrs right now. They feel like no one's understood them. Everyone's making fun of them. And so they're drawn to this belief system, when really it's sad that education hasn't stepped in and thought, for them, this does not seem right. Something inside of me, this is against what I believe. This doesn't make sense mentally, scientifically, spiritually, but they're longing to be part of something. And I think that's where Christians really could help now with the all-inclusive perspective.
Ready for the next question?
I guess. I don't know if we really talked about that one enough. That's what happens on the podcast too. We'll get into a question and we will just go, and I'll look at the phone ticking and I'm like, oh wow, this episode is going to be 7 hours long. This will really go well for people who are commuting.
All right, so the next question is, my dad just got the first vaccine shot, but my mom is refusing it because she is skeptical after reading some fundamentalist Christian publication by a dentist who seems to be posing as a COVID-19 expert. I'm a little worried, but I'm not sure whether to say anything. Even if I decided to talk to her, what could I possibly say to reassure her that it's safe to take the vaccine?
Wow, this one's heavy. So
because the first one was super light.
Yeah, because the first one about QAnon was like, we know this. We know this. This person, mom is reading. So she's skeptical. Now, unfortunately, she's reading fundamental Christian publication by a dentist who seems to be posing as a COVID-19 expert. When I read this, I kind of felt like this poor woman that's like getting advice about your marriage from a divorce attorney. Like, I'm very confused as to why this dentist has the power here. And is evidently knows some stuff about COVID-19. Now, my dentist is closed because he knows a lot about COVID-19. He refuses to see people. So that fascinated me there. But she's reading. So if she's reading, would she not then be willing to read something that a family member would produce that would be scientific? I mean, I believe if she's willing to read this, she might be also willing to read something else. Very healthy to express the concern. Mom, I'm scared. You not getting the vaccine scares me. I don't want you to die. A place of empathy and concern.
From a place of love.
From a place of love. Yeah. And then referring to the thousands of people who have gotten this vaccine. When the conversation about the vaccines first started, I don't know about you guys, but we read stories about people who literally believed that if they got this vaccine, overnight they were going to become like violent, overnight they were going to become homosexuals, that the idea of the vaccine was to, like, Bill Gates was going to now track you because your Facebook and Instagram doesn't do that already.
Right.
We need to be worried. You take a picture of everything you eat, drink, but now we're worried that Bill Gates has put a chip inside the vaccine so he can track your every whereabouts, which is called Google Maps. Everywhere you go, your phone tells Bill Gates where you're going. It tells Facebook what you want to buy. We heard some crazy things about the fear. People have gotten so feared up. I think it's important to refer to the scientists, to refer to the evidence. People don't want evidence anymore. That's the thing. Yeah. These last 4 years, there's been no evidence ever shared in the political world. So now people are used to saying, well, this is what it is, and I believe that's what it is. But then at the very end of this, once you've given them something to read, you got to let it go, because at the end of the day, we know people who are not going to get this vaccine.
Right.
And it makes us really sad, and we're scared for them because they're in a very high risk group. But at the end of the day, it has to be, I respect your decision over your body, But I think this person would be open to reading some sane scientific evidence. So I hope this family member would produce some evidence.
Right. But also understand that the possibility exists going into this conversation that the reason they're listening to this dentist COVID-19 expert is because they were already looking for an opinion to validate their own fear.
Their own fear.
Correct.
So yeah, then when I read something from a fundamental Christian publisher that says I shouldn't get the vaccine, I can sit back and say, oh wow, now I should not get the vaccine. Right. So there is a chance that the fear was already there, and now they've just found material to support that. So I would be mindful of that in the discussions.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, if I want to chime in here, that question was actually from me, and it's my mom was refusing the vaccine, but and my congregation knows that. Thanks for that. That really spoke to me when you said that if she's willing to read, this material, maybe she will also be willing to read, material that says the opposite or gives a more scientific view. Now,
right.
Just to clarify a little bit, that dentist is actually the wife of a very, very influential and famous pastor in Germany, evangelical type, fundamentalist type pastor. And so, the authority, I think, partially derives from the fact that she's married to this very influential pastor.
The plot thickens, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
there's some layers to why this would be taken as gold.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's probably going to be very, very difficult for me to make inroads there, because it has that spiritual dimension for her that she's connected with, whatever that word is. But yeah, so it's going to be I think it's going to be very difficult. But
the other thing too is I'm thinking that because this is your mom, though, on some level, though, she's got to consider you an expert too on multiple things. Don't you think you'll have that in your favor, or no?
No, it's always been a sort of a contention between us. She thinks I lost the true faith. By becoming more progressive. I mean, she does love me and appreciate me,
of course,
but I don't think she thinks I'm in the right place spiritually. So she will not take my word as a word of an expert. She'd rather go with a dentist.
What if you could say, just because I'm curious, what are the fundamentalists saying about the vaccine? I haven't read much about that. It's the same internationally. It's the same in Germany as it is here, that there are evangelical / fundamentalist groups. Not all evangelicals are like this, but the more conservative evangelical groups, they seem to really push for the idea that the pandemic itself, COVID-19, is already, they wouldn't call it a hoax maybe, but they would say it's exaggerated, and we should see it as a natural, just like we should consider it like the flu, it's the same thing or very similar. And so then, the anti-vaccine rhetoric comes in there, of course, too, because first of all, they don't take the pandemic as seriously as they should. And right. Secondly, then that has an influence on how they view the vaccine. And then, and I mean, the vaccine hasn't really been tested as much as it should have, or it usually is tested. So there is some concern that anybody could have, and that I think plays into that. And then there are actually examples of people that have actually died from, or shortly after receiving the vaccine have died. I don't know, Sarah, can you tell us more about that aspect of it?
Yeah, the minute this question came up, my thoughts were like racing, just from someone who works in healthcare, is a nursing student, and works in 2 different hospitals. Well, one is a lot of people say, well, the vaccine was made way quicker than it should have. But when there's a global pandemic, a lot of the normal waiting times that people have to get things approved were eliminated. So It's not like they were having to wait to get things approved because it was such a big, concern globally. That was the priority. So everything else that was waiting approval got put on hold. So that's why the vaccine, in a lot of aspects, got created so much faster than other things. And then also, I hear it be compared to the flu all the time. And people are like, well, people still get the vaccine for the flu, but then they get the flu anyway. Well, I always like to tell people that every year they guess which flu is going to be the most prominent that season, and that's the vaccine that you get. But that doesn't mean that's not the only flu virus going around. There are so many strains of the flu, and now they're talking about different strains of COVID occurring. But one thing that we are being told, like in nursing school, and this is for general, but if you have someone who's rather refusing medications or not wanting to, have a treatment done, you always want to, explain to them what could possibly happen, but then also have to understand that if they're not in the mindset to learn about, what's going on, then it's not the right time to talk with them about, alternatives or why, it's not a good idea with the decision that they're making, because they're not in the right mindset. So everything you say goes in one ear and out the other. And
Right.
I found that happening quite often in my field of practice. And even with just people I'm friends with on Facebook, I've tried to give like the scientific facts, but if they're not in that mentality to receive information that is set ground factual information, then it's not ready for them. So you kind of have to play along their time. And though we are in a pandemic and we want everyone to get vaccinated as fast as we can, you also have to kind of play along with everyone's mentality and where they're at. But no, I've definitely seen a lot of this occurring. And, luckily, a lot of my close friends are not in that group, but I've been friends with a lot of people on Facebook who are complete opposite. And, I'm one of those people that I'm like, tell me why you feel this way, But I've been finding that a lot of people are just reading the horror stories and not really looking further into it. Like I know Pastor Frank, you mentioned some people have died shortly after getting the vaccine. I read that too. And the cases that I had heard about and I read upon, they didn't find a connection to the death being due to the vaccine. Not saying that's the case for all of them, but you tell someone that and they're like, oh, well, they're just making that up. That's kind of like the response that I get when I try to tell people, I'm like, well, actually, it wasn't due to the vaccine that caused the death, but that's because they're not in the right mindset to learn. So that's kind of my little 2 cents on it.
What these people don't realize is that the vaccine doesn't really reach a certain amount of antibody generation for several weeks. And so those people that die right after they get the vaccine, I see in many cases that when this happens in a nursing home, they probably saw a problem coming up. And so the nursing home wanted to shift the blame to the vaccine. So those people already had caught the COVID before they were vaccinated, and it's not. And then their immune system takes at least 2 weeks to respond to the vaccine. So that's just a bunch of baloney.
It's the same people who say that they get sick from getting the flu vaccine.
Yeah.
But you're not being injected with the live virus. It's impossible to get the flu from the flu vaccine. So it's just like the same mentality. There's people who are like they just set in what they believe, and though we do have all these medicinal facts, where I've had like documents put up that are like government documents, then then people start bringing up the politic aspects because it's not the government. And so it really is just so hard because you try to bring up the science, but now the science and politics are merging into one, and it's just a very messy zone to kind of be in right now.
It's sad to me too, because what I hear a lot is people that like to play down the number of deaths and say things like, well, they were overweight, they had heart disease, they were seniors, they were still humans, they were still people. And even if you don't agree that every death that has been registered as a COVID death was a COVID death, you're talking about somebody's family. Somebody lost a loved one. And so when you say these numbers are, you wouldn't believe how many times I hear these numbers are fake, they're inflated, that's why we don't need the vaccine, they're just trying to force us to be chipped and all this. But yet they're the same people. Some of these conversations are the same people that I hear believe that when the Lord returns, people will be left behind and a trumpet will sound and the dead in Christ will rise, but they don't want to take the vaccine. So it's very confusing to me how the vaccine is crazy, but you can sit and tell me that, Clydette, you're going to be left behind if you don't get right with God, because you've left your faith. And when the rapture comes, it breaks my heart, the lack of compassion that we've seen when it comes to talking about COVID and the people that have died.
One of my favorite points to bring up is when people, because I hear the tracking thing all the time, is I'm like,
yeah,
you have a social security number, you have a identification number that links you within our government, you can't get more tracked than that, so there's
everything we do is tracked. So the idea of getting chipped by the COVID vaccine does not scare me when you know where I am.
My roommate and I were literally the other day talking about a specific item. 2 seconds later, she had an advertisement for it on her phone.
It's terrifying.
We always joke, we're like the government's listening to us, but it's the truth. And at the end of the day, truly, what does the government want from you that bad that they would be inserting a chip into you? That's what I want to know. What people think that the government wants from your body. I know.
Like you said, trying to talk to people, it reminds me of why they taught us in school, you can't conduct a session with an addict that's high or drunk, because nothing I say or do when they're high or drunk is going to get through to them. And sometimes these conversations I have with people about COVID or the vaccine, I think to myself, let's just pretend you're drunk and I'm going to stop talking, because nothing I'm saying is even when I refer to you to the medical information, it's not registering. You know what? It's funny too, because when Ben and I were getting ready to deploy, we had to get a whole bunch of vaccines. So many. I mean, they'll give you shots in the military for anything, like acne. They'll be like, we don't want you to get acne when you're deployed. Here's a vaccine. So we had to get, I don't think any of you would be familiar with the anthrax shots. That's a 6-shot series. Nobody asked us if we were okay with 6 shots. Nobody said, do you think we're about to chip you so we can know what you like to eat and drink? Nobody, it's so funny how the idea of these freedoms and people so overreact. And we're sitting there thinking, man, we had 6 shots for anthrax and you can't get 2 for a vaccine. So things like that drive me nuts, and we're probably going to end up ranting about that on an episode. I think that would be a good thing to rant about.
I see it coming.
Yeah, over it with the Overturfs. Get your vaccine, or do you want 6 anthrax shots? This is your choice.
You ready to move on to the next one?
Yeah, I love the third question.
So you're going to show off how.
I'm going to show up my reading skills, because we have identified through the podcast that you're an avid reader, but when you read things out loud.
So I think I figured it out.
Did you?
Because I am an avid reader. So I read super fast.
Yes.
And I found that reading out loud, slowing down, trips me up.
Okay. He would have hated being a pastor, because there's a lot of reading.
For so many reasons.
So much reading in public places. Okay. So here's our question. According to my therapist, I've been struggling with trying to control things I can't control. But since the pandemic, I feel like I've lost control over many things. Some of them basic things in life, such as getting up or doing work. It feels like my life is out of control most days, and all I can really do is just try to survive another day. Even prayer doesn't seem to help. What can I do to get my life back under some sort of normal control? Any suggestions would be appreciated.
That was beautifully done.
Thank you. The first thing I'd like to say is shout out to you for talking to a therapist. We're always proud of people. We should be getting paid royalties for how often on the podcast we've said, please talk to a therapist.
Every therapist should give us some royalty.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Please talk to a therapist. But you know what's fascinating is, if you're talking to your therapist about the struggle to control, something I would love for you to mention to the therapist is that control is a symptom. It's a symptom of fear. So yes, it's good to address control in your therapy sessions or in your counseling sessions with your pastor. But the real issue here is fear.
Fear is the great paralyzer.
Yes, absolutely. And what this person is dealing with is fear and anxiety. The control, again, it's a symptom. The need to make sure everything is just the way it should be. it's again a symptom of anxiety. If you look at OCD or you look at any of those things, they're symptoms of severe anxiety. So this person is clearly going through a lot of anxiety. I would love to see them address and list the fear. What all am I in fear of? What is keeping me up at night? What am I scared of? What is my worst case scenario? That's step number one, is you have to identify the fears, because again, controlling everything is the symptom. And prayer, I'm really glad to hear that you're not giving up on your prayer life, but something I prayed my whole life. I can remember saying prayers as young as 3, 4, 5 years old. But when I added meditation, now as soon as we hear that word, we get a little anxiety and we think, there's absolutely no way. Meditation, I'll be in my head. If you watch the movie Eat, Pray, Love with Julia Roberts, she does a great job of showing you the first few times you meditate is like a circus. It's literally like a circus. Everything's happening. But prayer in conjunction with meditation. And now there are all these amazing beginner apps. I still use a beginner app because I'm always on the next thing. It's a wonderful way to treat your anxiety and your fear. Is look at these, and they're free. A lot of these apps for meditation are free. So I'm not saying stop praying, keep praying. But in conjunction with your prayer life, you should probably add that meditation piece. And again, with the apps, very simple. It's going to walk you through how to quiet your head. I actually went to a class. We have a Buddhist temple nearby, and they had classes, and I signed up and I thought, this is going to be awful because I'll be the only one in the room thinking about the 25 things I have to buy at the grocery store while she's like leading us in a guided meditation. The first time it was exactly like you fear it's going to be. My head was all over the place. It was insane. But then I went to another class, and slowly but surely, like anything, with practice, I was able to free my mind, and it actually lowered my blood pressure. My doctor was amazed. She's like, your blood pressure is so much lower. And I'm like, I'm telling you, I really believe that the meditation has helped. Whereas prayer is great. We're lifting things out to God, to the universe, but meditation is helping you calm the anxiety. And you're going to see a difference in your need to have everything in your control. Because once your anxiety is under control, for lack of a better term, you're not going to feel you need to micromanage your life.
I have a suggestion.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, so you're talking about control. You feel out of control. Focus on one thing that you can control. And to me, like, wake up, make your bed.
Yeah, we do that with the 12
That's one
steps.
thing that you've controlled. You got up and you made your bed.
Yes.
You're in control of that. But also think about what that does for you. You've accomplished something. So even if your day just fell apart, nothing else went right that day, you still accomplished making your bed. And when you got home at the end of the day, you can visibly see that.
And the pandemic has been so hard for people suffering from anxiety, because when it's very easy, and depression, it's very easy right now. We're not having to see a lot of people. We're not going a lot of places. But, the suggestion is where in here it says even basic things, just like getting up and going and getting work done. Get up, get dressed, put the makeup on, put the jewelry on, make the bed, make efforts that you still would have done if you were going to see 1 million people that day. But the idea is get up, get out there. But honestly, the control piece is really a symptom of fear and anxiety. So please ask the therapist to talk about fear and anxiety.
Yeah.
I just want to second the meditation, because so I see a therapist once a week. Right now we're, Zoom therapy, but we got to love technology. And she's the one that introduced it to me too. And I had the same exact experience the first time. Halfway through, the person that was doing the guided meditation said, okay, bring back your focus. And I didn't even realize I wasn't focused on the meditation until this little voice on the video said, bring back your focus. And I was like, oh my God, my brain was like in another land. And it truly is, like, when I'm stressed, my roommates all know it. I shut my door. I lay down on my floor like a starfish, and I just play my meditation videos. And it's truly like, I preach it to everyone. I did like a self-care video for, I'm like in charge of all the sororities on my campus. I did a self-care video, and I like preach meditation, and I like put in an intro video. So yeah, for anyone else who's kind of maybe on the verge of it. Can't
you say that the meditation is a way to establish control? at a physical level, especially with the breathing, which is the basis for a mindfulness meditation. So it's a good way to lower your blood pressure and your anxiety, and because you can feel in control of your own body.
Yeah. Sarah, how does the Zoom therapy feel from a client perspective? I've always wanted, like, if you don't mind sharing.
No, I don't mind. It's definitely it was weird at first, but I'm used to it now, and I just like the face-to-face aspect. So I don't personally mind it. I mean, obviously I wish I was in person, but when COVID first hit, I was doing like just over the phone, and I hated that because I felt like I was talking to a wall. I had no idea what to look at. And so like I didn't like that aspect of it, but now that we have the Zoom portion of it, I love it because I can still look at my therapist and she can look at me, and like,
Nice.
you know, she can still see like my reaction. So it's kind of, you know, better for her because she can tell if I'm trying to like hold back an emotion or, you know, whatnot. And she can see like, oh, I can tell you're getting worked up about something. So it's definitely good in that aspect, because when you're just on the phone, it's really easy to like hide your emotions and be like, yeah, everything's great. Especially in this virtual world, you know, like you guys said, it's so easy to just kind of curl into your bed and be like, oh, I don't have to socialize with people. But no, I definitely love it. I was just talking to her last week, kind of a similar situation of saying like, I feel like everything's spiraling out of control. And she's like, well, what's wrong with that? You know, why do you need to be in control? So it's kind of, you know, interesting. And I celebrated that I had done my laundry one day, because that was like a huge task for me. So, you know, it's just like the small things, and I definitely can relate to everything you guys just said.
Yes.
Yeah, little victories. And it's funny because back to, you know, the idea of things being you know, people being scared of things. I remember inquiring about meditation when I was in Bible college, and you would have thought I just asked my professors, you know, when are we going to start, you know, like blood sacrifices? You should have seen the looks. It was meditation. We don't need meditation. You have prayer. And I'm like, yeah, but I pray all the time, but I'm still anxious and I still can't, my mind is racing, and meditation. And now, at least now it's not as scary, you know, but I still have family members that refer to meditation as letting demons in. So
it's crazy.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. It's so sad because it's such a powerful tool. And if you really think about it, if you look at some of the best stories of Christ when he was interacting with people, how many times did he remove himself? And these are my favorite stories about Jesus, and they don't get enough play. How many times did he leave and he would walk away and they would accuse him of not wanting to help? But he would be going off to the other side of the lake, and he would take a few minutes, gather himself, and but master, they're starving. Yep, I just need a minute. You know, he went over there to gather his thoughts, to silence his mind, and go back to the craziness that was dealing with humanity. And so if you look at the life of Christ, there's plenty of opportunities to see that meditation was probably one of his best friends when he was having to walk the earth. So I'm a big believer in it.
I got to chime in here because I, not too long ago, maybe 3-4 months ago, I actually I studied this a little bit about meditation and the Christian tradition of meditation. And it's actually right there in the Christian tradition, so strong. There are so many different techniques, you know, and it's a strong tradition. I mean, it goes way back. So it's really something that I think Christianity, especially Protestant Christianity, evangelical Christianity, has totally lost. And now when people from those circles hear the word meditation, they think Buddhism, but it's a very strong Christian tradition, and we should go back to it because it's very important. I'm going to share the link to that presentation I did right there in the chat room, so you can take it right from there.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So I think that was the end of the questions that we got. If anybody else had more questions that they wanted to chime in with.